greater the pain, the greater the scar mitzvah.
Well, Rabbi, he didn't come tonight. I see my new friend, the doctor.
Oh, he didn't come.
Forgot
Okay.
his name. He's not
All right.
here. But I'll tell you.
We have the good rabbi instead.
Oh, please, don't. The good rabbi is sitting here. Yeah, more.
Love what you had to say.
Yeah.
You're not from Holland originally, if that's not. Because someone with your accent just comes to
Maybe.
mind.
Could be.
From Holland?
You're just someone I know in
I'm Israeli film generation, so it's too.
He's from Adam Arisha. Okay, Chevra. So welcome back. It's nice to have you back. I'll start slowly so Tina can catch up. Kadosh Baruch Hu promises, we were learning that the Malach is going to lead Bnei Yisrael into Eretz Yisrael, and the Malach is going to help Bnei Yisrael conquer the nations who live there. We're on page 438, Perek Chav Gimel, Pasuk Chav Daled. After Bnei Yisrael are told that the angel is going to go in front of them and he's going to bring them to this land, so then the Torah tells us, Lo sishtachaveh leloheihem, that you, talking to Bnei Yisrael, Kadosh Baruch Hu says, you are not allowed to worship their deities, v'lo se'avdeim, and not to serve them, v'lo sa'aseh chema'asehem, and don't do like their deeds, ki hares tiharseim, rather completely eliminate them, v'shaber tishaber, and completely destroy matzevo sehem, their matzevos, their pillars. So we need to understand a little bit about what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying here. On a pshat level, it seems that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling us clearly that there's a prohibition of Avodah Zarah. That we're going to go into the land, and what's going to happen? So we're not going to be able to conquer the land, the entirety of the land right away, and there are going to still be people from these nations who will remain in the land throughout the time of our conquest of the land. So says Kadosh Baruch Hu, Lo sishtachaveh leloheihem. Don't bow down, don't worship their deities. So I guess the question that we need to begin with is, what was the Kadosh Baruch Hu thinking? Right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu is thinking that we're going to worship their deities, right? We're not so far from Har Sinai. We're not so far from the Aseres Adibros. We're not so far from the prohibition of Avodah Zarah. So why does HaKadosh Baruch Hu now have to come along and say, listen, the Malach is going to go in front of you. He's going to lead you into the land. He's going to help you defeat the enemies. And by the way, Lo sishtachaveh leloheihem. Don't bow down to their deities, to their idols. V'lo sa'avdeim, and don't serve them. Why? I mean, obviously, there's a prohibition of Avodah Zarah. We know that. We heard that in the Aseres Adibros. Why does HaKadosh Baruch Hu come along again to tell us, don't worship their deities, don't worship their idols?
He knows human nature.
Oh,
I'm a Beor if I'm not.
so it's interesting. I mean, Mike, I think Mike said it a little bit tongue-in-cheek, that Kadosh Baruch Hu knows human nature, but Mike is mechavein to the Perush of the Ramban here. What does the Ramban say? Ramban says precisely that. The Ramban says, even though HaKadosh Baruch Hu told us at Har Sinai not to worship idols, Kadosh Baruch Hu knows that we have to be reminded over and over and over again. And the Ramban gives the following mashal. The Ramban says that this is very similar. I'll read it to you. Says the Ramban, Ka'omer la'avdo, like a master who says to his servant, Zachor tamid velo tishkach ha'ikar hagadol shetzivi sicha shehakol talui bo. Whereas what does he say to his servant? Remember, don't forget this important principle that I taught you, that everything is dependent on it. Whatever it is, I mean, the Ramban doesn't, he's not giving us a specific example, but the master taught the Eved something. He taught him something, and it was a very important thing, whatever it was, right? Whatever it was. So he says to him over and over and over again, remember, don't forget, because this principle is so important, everything rests on it. The Adon doesn't want to keep telling this over and over again, right? But he knows that he needs to constantly remind the servant. Because if he doesn't remind the servant's human nature, the servant he's gonna forget. So just like the Adon constantly reminds the Eved, says the Ramban, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to constantly remind us. Even though he told us already at the Aseres HaDibros, he still has to come along and tell us here again. So on one level, we understand that. But might there be another way to look at it? The Ramban brings the second way down as well. And the Ramban says that I could perhaps come up with a rationale as to why Bnei Yisrael, despite having heard at Har Sinai the prohibition of Avodah Zarah, Lo yeh lecha Elohim acherim, despite having heard that, I can come up with a possible rationale, says the Ramban, why Bnei Yisrael would have a havamina, why they would have an assumption that perhaps these deities are different. Perhaps these deities are different. So we know what's the nature of the Shiva Amamim, of the 7 nations who lived in Eretz Yisrael. Were they successful in Eretz Yisrael, or were they not successful in Eretz Yisrael? They were very successful.
The grapes.
They were very successful. We learned, right? We didn't learn it here, but maybe I've mentioned it by the Miraglim, right? That they needed 8 people to carry the grapes, right? 8 people, 2 on each end of 2 sticks that crossed together like this, and the grapes hung from the center. They needed 8 people. And then the 9th person carried a rimon, right? 1 rimon, 1 pomegranate. And the 10th person carried, I don't remember.
So the land was responsive.
The land was responsive to them. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave the bracha to the land for them. And not only that, but they were very powerful. They were like giants, right? They were giants. What did the Meraglim say? We were in their eyes like chagavim, like grasshoppers. They were like giants. So Bnei Yisrael know, if they don't know it now, but they will know that the land has been very responsive to these nations that are living there. So what do they think? So says the Ramban, not in these words, but says the Ramban, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Meaning, how come these people are so successful? How come the land is responsive to them? How come they're so strong? How come they're huge? Why? Because the deities that they're worshiping happen to be the right deities for these things. In other words, Bnei Yisrael, says the Ramban, Bnei Yisrael are going to come and they're going to see what's going on. They're going to see what they have to defeat. And they're not going to defeat on their own. They're going to need this malach of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to defeat them. And they're going to say, hey, you know what? These guys had it right. Look at them. They survived here in this land all this time, and the land was good to them. So maybe what they were doing was not so bad. Right? Maybe the fact that they were worshiping this deity, this idol, this, that,
Works.
maybe it works. Maybe it works. Yes, Tina.
But also it says that Hashem, instructed the Bnei Israel to conquer the land bit by bit, not all at once. At least that's what the question. All right,
Correct.
not all at once. So if they conquered it all at once, and all the Silim and they were expunged all at once, so you wouldn't really need that warning to not to worship them. But the fact that there's a vacuum here, the fact that it took
There's
a long,
interaction.
there's a long time till it was done. The Bamot and the Silim were around, and when
That's-
they were around,
That's well,
it's
okay.
seductive.
So that is precisely.
That's why.
That's where the Ramban is. That's where the Ramban is going with this. That's what the Ramban says. This is his second interpretation. His first interpretation is, it's like a kid. You have to drill it into his head. You have to keep reminding him. You have to keep reminding him. Right? Don't run into the street. Don't run into the street. Don't run into the street. Or how many times did we tell our children growing up not to run into the street before we hold off and convince them not to go into the street? All right. In other words, we had to keep repeating it because. So that's the Ramban's first teretz. The Ramban's second teretz is different. The Ramban's second teretz says Kadosh Baruch Hu is reminding them now because he needs to, because the mitzius, the reality of the situation is going to perhaps cause Bnei Yisrael to look at things differently. Kadosh Baruch Hu told us at Har Sinai, don't worship idols, don't worship avodah zarah. No, that makes sense when you're in the midbar, right? But now, where are we? Now we're going into Eretz Yisrael. Kadosh Baruch Hu, we're not getting man anymore. We're not getting nemayim anymore. We're going to have to work. Hey, these guys know what they're doing. They know how it works. They've been successful. We should do what they're doing. Kadosh Baruch Hu comes along and says, nope, you shouldn't do it. Right? You shouldn't do it. You're not allowed to do it. It's prohibited to do. It's avodah zarah. Okay, it's avodah zarah.
And I'm surprised that Hashem told them to do it gradually, even though there's a reason for it. But I would imagine that, the fact that when you tell people to do something gradually and the task schleps along, that eventually people get tired of war and they're not interested in fighting anymore. This way, if you throw them all out, or if you go to war with all of them in a certain period of time, you get the job done.
Wasn't there something called the 100-Year War?
Yeah, but that's not us. In other words, they languished. I think part of the problem of the Sefer Shoftim,
is the interaction. Eino chinami. I agree with you. 100%. 100%.
They do it right away.
100%. Listen to the words of the Ramban. Let me just share this with you. Listen to the words of the Ramban. Va'achshav, right? He says vayitachen, and it's possible shetazhir ba'aseres adibros, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu warned them not to worship idols in the Aseres HaDibros. Right? Shelo yaseh lo avodah zarah v'lo ya'avdenu. Right? What is the Ramban saying? He's adding another piece here. He says, what did HaKadosh Baruch Hu say at Har Sinai? Don't make an avodah zarah and don't worship it. What might Bnei Yisrael have thought? This is already a third approach. What might Bnei Yisrael have thought? Bnei Yisrael might have thought, listen, I'm not allowed to make an avodah zarah and worship it. However,
It's there.
it's right there.
Prospectively, as opposed to, in other words, don't make an avodah zarah prospectively, but if it's already been made.
And in other words, the Ramban is pointing out this potential pitfall of the machshava of Bnei Yisrael. That's why a Kadosh Baruch, because maybe, they say, we heard, what did you hear? So maybe we heard you're not allowed to make it. And you're not allowed to worship it. But if we didn't make it, maybe we can worship it. So that's yet another interpretation of the Ramban. The Nitziv echoes the second. Let me just share this with you from the Nitziv. Says the Nitziv, he's here beyichud al Elohei Shiva Umos shenichadu lifnei Yisrael, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu commanded them specifically regarding the deities of these 7 nations who they were going to conquer. Mishum shahayu alulim lachshov because they were gonna think, says the Netziv, Kemo shenis parnesu osam shiva umos ad ko, just like these idols, these gods, these deities helped the nations ad ko until now, al kain ya'asu gam heimakach. What did they think? We'll also do it. We'll also do it. Ki avodas oso Eloha misugal la'oso eretz. Because these guys knew the right idols to worship. And that's why they were so successful. So that this is the major question that the Meforshim ask on this pasuk. Why is HaKadosh Baruch Hu repeating this prohibition of lo sishtachaveh lo heihem velo sa'avdein? It's interesting. Why does it have to say velo sa'avdein? And you shall not worship them. Why not just say lo sishtachaveh lo heihem? Why do we have to say velo sa'avdein? What's the difference? So we know what?
Other forms of avoda.
So say that a little bit. Say it a little bit better. What do you mean other forms of avoda? That what?
Without being mishtacha, you could offer korbanos. You could
Says the Ramban.
sing to them.
Says the Ramban. There were avodah zaras in which the manner of worshiping them was disgusting.
Disgusting.
Balpor defecated on the avodah zara. Marcolis, you threw stones at the avodah zara. What might we think? Says the Ramban, we might think, you know what? I'm being mevazeh the avodah zara. I'm denigrating the avodah zara. In my mind, defecating on an avodah zara, that's what I'm supposed to, right?
That's one of the ways to nullify it, to be mavaz and avodah zarah.
Yeah, right. So I'll. This is disgusting. I'll do this and I'll nullify the avodah zara. Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, lo se'avdeim. What does it mean, lo se'avdeim? Don't worship them the way that they're worshipped, even if in your eyes it's considered disgusting. This is the way they worship it, and even if you, I don't know, maybe when they defecate on the avodah zara, they have kavana, whatever, in a positive way, however you can do that. And when you defecate on the avodah zara, you have kavana in a negative way. I'm denigrating it. I'm being mevazeh.
But the behavior looks the same.
Says the Ribono Shel Olam, according to the Ramban, don't do it, right? Because it's considered being oved avodah zara. Even though you're looking at it and saying you're being mevazeh, nope, don't do it. That's why lo sishtachaveh le lo heihem. Don't bow down to their gods, meaning don't do what you would see as, quote, normal worship. And velo se'avdeim, don't worship the way they worship, even if in your eyes it seems like it's being mevazeh their deities, their idols. Don't do those two
I
things.
remember reading in one of the Perushim on Baal Pa'or that the theory behind that kind of avoda was freedom. The license to be able to do whatever you want. That the divinity,
Bacchanalian.
almost a little bit like today.
It's like Bacchanalian.
Yeah,
The Greeks did. They went-
anything goes. Anything goes, and this was the ultimate expression
Sexual
of that.
mores went crazy, anything.
Right, does sound a lot like today. Okay. So after HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells them, Lo sishtachaveh le lo heihem velo se'avdeim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu now introduces another concept, and what is that? Velo sa'aseh kima'asehem. You shall not do like they do. Should not do like they do. What does that mean? You should not do like they do. So, let's begin. The Gemara actually wants to suggest that this pasuk the piece of this pasuk of lo sa'asechem ma'aseihem is the source for the prohibition of following Darkei Emori. There's an expression, Darkei Emori. What does Darkei Emori mean? The ways of the Emoriim, of the Amorites, that one of the nations that are living there, the Emori. These are the ways of the Emori that we're not allowed to. This has nothing to do now with Avodah Zarah. Nothing to do with worshiping a deity, nothing to do with bowing down to an idol, nothing to do with it. It has to do with following in their behavior. Can't do things that they do.
The
Can't-
Amorim particularly.
The Amori was representative of this general type of behavior that we're going to struggle to understand. In other words, we're not worshiping idols. We're not bowing down to deities. We're not defecating on Balpur. We're not throwing stones at Markelis. We're not doing any of those things. But there are still things that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says we're not allowed to do because they are kima'asehem. They are like their deeds. Rashi in the Gemara does not see this pasuk as the source for that. Some of the other Meforshim do. Rashi sees another pasuk and the source for that, and that pasuk is Uvechu Kosehem. I'm sure you remember, right? The pasuk Uvechu Kosehem lo seilechu. It's a pasuk Achremos Kima'asei Eretz Mitzrayim Asher Yeshavtem Ba Lo Sa'asu. Right? You shouldn't do like the customs of Egypt where you came from. Uchema'asei Eretz Canaan Asher Ani Mevi Eschem Shama Lo Sa'asu. And don't do like they do in Canaan. Now, we're not talking here about Avodah Zarah. That's something different. Here we're talking about not imitating their behavior. Uvechu Kosehem Lo Seilechu. Don't go in their ways. Says the Gemara, what does Uvechu Kosehem Lo Seilechu mean? It means don't do the things that are considered derech emori. There are 2 chapters in the Tosefta of Masechah Shabbos that talk about what is considered derech emori. What are we not allowed to do that is considered derech emori? So I'll give you some examples. The Tosefta says that the Emori, they used to put thorns in a window to protect a pregnant woman from evil spirits. Can't do that. Not allowed to do that.
You put a chamsa there?
Hold on. Not allowed to do. You can't put thorns in the window to protect a pregnant woman. You can't, they used to tie iron to the beds. The Tosefta doesn't tell us why. But they used to tie metal, iron, bars of iron to the bed. Not allowed to do that. They used to say you can't sit on the plow in the field, because if you sit on the plow in the field, you're going to make it an unproductive season. Right? Not allowed to do that. Not allowed to say those things. That's considered darchei emori. What is? But let me ask you a question. What about putting a red bendel around your wrist? You go to the kotel. You give. Used to be $1. Now they don't take dollars anymore. They only take 5s. You give whatever, and they put a red bendel around your wrist. Are you violating darchei emori? Right? You have a new grandchild, you tie a red bendel around the carriage. Are you violating darchei emori? The Gemara itself in Masechah Shabbos says that if you have an earache, what are you supposed to do? Anybody know what the Gemara recommends for an earache?
The doctor.
Well, I would have agreed with you.
Homemade remedies.
Right? But the Gemara says you take the egg of a grasshopper.
Oy.
You take the egg of a grasshopper and you put the egg of a grasshopper in your ear. Now, I don't know how big a grasshopper egg is. I can't imagine it's that big, right? But you take the egg of a grasshopper, you put it in your ear, and that will help you. So the question the Gemara deals with is, can I go out on Shabbos with that? We're talking about a place without an Eruv. Can I go? Am I carrying because I have the egg of a grasshopper in my ear?
I'm thinking, where do you find the grasshopper so easy?
Morris, in those days, I think maybe there might have been more grasshoppers around. Where do you find the egg of the grasshopper? I don't know, but okay, that was one thing. If you couldn't sleep, what does the Gemara say you should do?
Warm milk?
Nope,
No.
nope. Should take the tooth of a fox, and you should wear it around your neck.
That works.
So the Gemara says, can I go out on Shabbos wearing this tooth of a fox? Or am I carrying?
Does it still work? This is
All right. I mean,
These are all these homemade remedies of years ago.
the Gemara in Masechah Shabbos says that if I take a nail from a pole on which someone was hung, ready for this? I take a nail from a pole on which someone was hung and I wear it on my neck, it will help me heal from any wounds on my body. Okay.
This is not garlic. This is my grandmother used to say, we're garlic,
Why is this any different? Why is this any different?
I don't know. To me, it's superstitions,
The Gemara asks the question, wait a second, right? I can't put thorns in the window to ward off an evil spirit for a pregnant woman. That's Darkei Amori. But I can put a nail, I can wear a nail from a pole on which someone was hung to heal myself from wounds. That's not considered Darkei Amori. And all these other things are not considered Darkei Amori. I wear a fox's tooth, I put the grasshopper's egg in my ear. That's not considered Darkei Amori. Says the Gemara in the name of Abaye and Rava. When it comes to something which is therapeutic, when it comes to refuah, there's no thing as Darkei Amori. When it comes to refuah, there's no thing as Darkei Amori.
But as the thorns in the window.
So wait a second. Darkei Amori is the
cultural
going in the ways of these of the Amorite people who lived in Israel at the time, right? Following in their ways, right? We're not talking about their idolatry. We're not talking about worshiping their deities. We're talking about imitating their customs. So we have a list of things in the Tosefta that we're not allowed to do. On the other hand, the Gemara Masechah Shabbos tells us here are things that we are allowed to do. So, why no to one? Why yes to the others? So the Gemara explains that the fundamental definition of Darkei Amori is something that neither makes sense rationally nor has a track record of working. But why do people do it? They do it because this was their custom. In other words, it's rooted in nothing, right? It's not rational, it's not logical, it doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't work. So based on those two things, the only reason they're doing it is because in their mind, some kind of supernatural spirit they have to pacify, whatever. We're not allowed to do that. When it comes to these refuos, Abaye and Rava say, no problem, we can do it. Says the Rambam, because these refuos must have worked. That in those days, these refuos must have worked. Okay? Meaning that if you had ear pain and you put the eggs of a grasshopper in your ear, it must have helped. And that's why Bnei Yisrael did it, right? It doesn't matter that it's not logical. It doesn't matter that it's not rational. It doesn't matter that we don't understand how it works. But the fact that Bnei Yisrael were doing it, that's an indication that it must have worked, says the Rambam.
Definition of a placebo effect.
Yeah.
any any machinated contortions that you put someone through, the more complex you make it, the more you create a belief system that, hey, this is I'll do this and I'll do that, and if I get that and I mix it with this, it'll work.
And that's what the Drashos Haran says. The Drashos Haran says that sometimes things have an effect physically, and sometimes things have an effect psychologically. He doesn't use the word psychologically, but I think that's what he's referring to. Sometimes things have an effect psychologically. So these behaviors that at first glance would seem to be no different than the things that we're not permitted to do, these behaviors, says the Ramban, had some kind of therapeutic effect, either physically or perhaps psychologically, perhaps some kind of placebo effect. They don't work today. How come? Right? None of us would do this today. None of us would do this today.
Still is around.
But none of us would put grasshopper eggs in our
You don't have
ears,
the merit of
right?
those.
So there are those who say
merit.
that there are those who say that the nature of the world has changed.
That'll change.
That Teva has changed, the nature of people has changed, and the nature of the world has changed. Now, we can scoff at this perhaps, but if you think about the source for many life-saving medications, they're not synthetic. What are they?
Natural.
They are derivatives of products that HaKadosh Baruch Hu put in the world, that others were using before we understood that. And we learned from that. Now, it is true that they make synthetic medications to mimic or to imitate what certain natural things do. But we shouldn't deceive ourselves to think that there are not natural remedies in the world that actually work. These might not work anymore, but that there are indeed actual remedies that work. It's interesting.
Rabbi, I'm a little suspicious of this. As an example, we go to the egg of the ear from the grasshopper. I mean, so who would come up with the idea of finding grasshopper and its egg and put it in your ear to solve that particular illness?
I mean, who's the first one who put a grasshopper egg in his ear?
Yeah, and who gave me the idea to do it and it's beyond.
Mars, I don't know how these things get started, but I'll tell you one thing. If it worked, spread like wildfire. Because if something works, everybody hears about it. Seriously, everybody hears about it, right? So whoever did this, at first, they found out that it worked.
In fairness, people do the most unbelievably crazy things if they have chas v'shalom cancer, and they reach out and they're grasping at straws, and it's mind-boggling what some people have done in the course of recent history.
Right. I mean,
Eddie, this one, I'm sorry.
we're not talking.
I assume
you're not talking about natural kinds of therapies, but you're talking about things that are like
Things that are not
A little bit off the
scientifically
wall.
validated.
I understand that. I
Okay,
understand.
so these are the kinds of
How do they
things.
spread the word?
So these are the kinds of things that are not considered darkei emori, because according to the Rambam or according to the Drashos Haran, they have either some kind of physical impact, or they have some kind of perhaps psychological impact. We don't know exactly how they work, right? And they might not work anymore, but at one point in time, they did work. They did work. And in fact, that's why people did them. What?
How did the red bendel start? I mean, I grew up like it. My grandmother right away. I mean, when I was a baby, she put a red bendel in the cow.
Not only you, huge Talmidei Chachamim, grew up for hundreds of years. Ultra-religious families have been tying red bendels around.
You know where penicillin came from?
No. A moldy bread.
A mold.
A mold. Right.
He told somebody, if you were sitting in a class and he said, to cure infections and flu and everything else, just eat mold.
That was his red pen?
No, but I mean, I think what Mike is saying, you're asking two different questions. The red bendel is a separate thing. The red bendel is a separate thing. We're going to come to the red bendel. But what I'm talking about is these things that Abaye and Rava say are l'shem refuah, that as long as there is some kind of track record for these things, then the Rambam says you could do it. It's not Darkei Amori. The Drush Saran says you could do it. It's not Darkei Amori.
The concept of infecting an animal in order to get a vaccine. So you tell somebody, you should take the blood of an animal that's been previously injected.
And injected in an attenuated form into.
I mean, it sounds silly, but experientially it works.
So, right? So, that highlights that what we know today, 50 years ago, they thought, man, when was penicillin more than...
1930s.
All right,
Yeah.
so 100 years ago, right? 100 years ago, it was unheard of. 100 years ago, it wasn't heard of.
My father practiced medicine in a Siberian prison camp, labor camp. And he was a doctor there. He practiced medicine without antibiotics,
They didn't have antibiotics, right? Right. Okay, so we have this Darkei Amori, which we say is absolutely not based on rational logic or understanding, and doesn't have a track record. However, when it comes to refuah, if there's something that has a track record, even if we don't understand it, so we are allowed to do it, it's not considered Darkei Amori. What about if it's not refuah per se? In other words, what about if it is to bring parnasa? Right? There's no illness. It's not curing an illness. It's not helping you feel better. But it's, you're wearing it as a skula for parnasa, right? Or you're wearing it as a skula to ward off the ayin hara, hence the red bendel. Whereas it's not for refuah. It's not something that has a track record right? So can you do it or can't you do it? So it's interesting. Let's just look at the red bendel per se. You have poskim vehemently on both sides of the issue.
Yeah, I know.
There are poskim who say it's Darkei Amori, it's prohibited mid-dioraisa. You put a red bendel on, you're violating a Torah precept. And there are others who say, Chas v'shalom, how could you say that? It's a minhag Yisrael for hundreds of years. How can we say that a minhag Yisrael is a violation of a pasuk in the Torah? Can't be, it's impossible. It must be that they understood when this minhag began that it was effective. And if it's a minhag Yisrael, we shouldn't be mevazeh. Right? So I literally on both ends of the spectrum. Both ends of the
It
spectrum.
comes from the Ezel Azazel or something like that.
Where it comes from, what it's based on, all kinds of, all kinds of things that are not rational, but there are those Gedolim who say, listen, you're not being over an Isser if you wear it. They're not saying you have to go out and buy one, but they're saying you're not being you're over an Isser if you wear it. There are those who say it's Usser, Midyoraisa.
At the kotel is so strong that they give it out at the kotel.
That what?
The
What'd you-
red bendel, they give it out at the kotel.
So, what's that a
I'm
riot
saying
to?
It has a very strong backing of people who believe in it.
It has a very strong backing of people who are collecting tzedakah.
They can run it.
Oh,
They're giving nothing.
oh.
Right.
Give me $20, I have to give you something.
Let her have a dream.
More machlokas of Chassidish versus Mishnah.
That's okay.
Hasidish versus Misnagdish, 100%, right, 100%.
When the Jews dispersed all through history, and even recently go to Shanghai, there are Jewish communities here, there, and everywhere, and new culture, and they move into town, and they find out that the locals are grinding up this bush, this tree, this, that, and they feel that it prevents them from getting A, B, or C. That's perfectly acceptable behavior. It's not Darkei Amori because it's all health oriented.
And it seems to have a track record.
Whether it's Burgermeister or not.
No, there has to be some kind of track record to
Well,
it.
the track record simply is that they say that it works. I mean, you're
Okay.
not gonna go do a scientific.
All right,
paper.
we're not talking about, obviously not talking about a scientific double-blind study. We're talking
Right.
about people say that it works, okay?
Good enough.
But in addition, so we have the things that are clearly darkei amori. Don't make any sense, you know, why you're doing it doesn't make any sense, it's not rational, doesn't have a track record, doesn't work, but they do it. Then we have things for a refuah. If it has a track record, even if we don't understand why it works, we can do it. Okay, we can do it. If you're not sure, even if it's for refuah, you could do it. What about if it's for parnasa? What about if it's a skula? In other words, not a refuah, it's a skula. So again, so this, you know, they're a little bit less lenient with than the poskim are with refuah, and there are those who say okay, and there are those who say forget about it. What about things that are pure superstitions? What about things that are pure superstitions? I'll give you a couple examples. How many people will open an umbrella indoors? Did you ever hear that you shouldn't open an umbrella indoors?
Yes, I have.
My second,
But I do.
my second.
Hope someone's eye out.
Right? Why not?
Why not?
Why is there
No fun.
It was raining.
a tradition not to open an umbrella indoors?
Couple of reasons, actually.
Go ahead.
One is
Poke
you
somebody's
open
eye
the
out.
umbrella, you'll hit someone else indoors with it. When you open it, that's one reason.
Okay. Okay.
And the other one is, what are you, crazy? You're inside. It doesn't rain inside, so.
So
Sorry.
if you do some research into opening up an umbrella indoors, you'll find that it's based on a superstition that by opening up an umbrella at a time when it's not necessary, you will be causing a rain cloud to hover over you. In other words, it's similar to a black cat crossing your path, right? A black cat crosses your path. What do you say? I'm going to have bad luck. I break a mirror. What do you say? I'm going to have bad luck, right? No, I'm not saying we say it, Morris. I'm not saying we say it. I'm saying there are people who, if a black cat walks in front of them, they say they're going to have, right? If they walk under, they don't walk under a ladder. They walk around, not walk. All right, walking under a ladder perhaps has a little bit of a, but they break a mirror. I got to do tshuva, whatever, right? These are superstitions that, according to halacha, are prohibited. We're not allowed to follow these superstitions. It's called nichush, right? It's a kind of divine. We're not allowed to believe that things that happen predict what's going to happen to us, because that takes away bechira chavshis. That takes away freedom of choice. So we're not allowed to believe those things, right?
If you're on a bad streak, is it acceptable, appropriate to check your mezuzahs? Is that?
Look, you can
You
always,
can always do that, but.
right? You
if
can
do
always
it-
check your
If
mezuzahs.
that's your kavanah.
If checking your mezuzahs makes you feel better, all right, maybe there's a problem with your mezuzahs. I don't know, but if checking your mezuzahs makes you feel better, kol hakavod.
I understand. It makes
Halavai,
sense,
Eddie,
so-
halavai, that should be the biggest problem that you have, is people check their mezuzahs too much, right? Halavai, okay? But in other words, these are things, right? Checking your mezuzahs, I can kind of hear,
I can
right,
buy
whatever, I
that
can
one.
kind
I
of hear.
like that
Okay,
one.
you like that one, good, okay. So there are other things, by the way, that are particularly Jewish superstitions. As an example, I grew up with this one. You're not allowed to walk over a child.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to step over a child.
You won't grow.
You have to step around the child. You're not allowed to step over the child. I don't know if any of you grew up with that. I grew up with that.
No.
I grew up with that. If I would walk over one, my mother went nuts.
Why? What was the anticipated?
She didn't know,
Oh,
right? Why?
don't
Because
do it,
because that's how she grew up,
Well,
okay.
it's a sakana,
right?
potential sakana.
No, so you could say maybe it's a potential sakana, maybe you'll trip, maybe you'll kick the
Right,
baby,
right,
maybe you'll
right.
do something like that. So it seems that the source for this particular superstition and what it's rooted in is you're also not allowed to pass over a piece of bread. It's an interesting minhag.
Excuse me.
Labriut. If you go to someone's house and you're sitting around the table, the balabayas makes hamotzi, right? And he hands out a piece of bread. So, what do you think you should do with that piece of bread?
Take it.
Take it and do what?
Eat it. Eat it.
You wouldn't hand it to the next person?
No.
Pass
I'll
it.
copy your
Pass it
mother.
down?
I'll copy
You're not
your
allowed to.
mother.
You're not allowed to pass it.
You're not supposed to.
I don't even think you should,
Right.
because why are you touching their bread? The bread.
You're not supposed to.
In other
You're not
words,
supposed to.
You have a tray of bread and you pass the tray around.
You
Yes.
take a piece, you don't pass it, you don't pass over the bread. I know that you can't use those two words together, right? You don't pass over the bread, right? You don't not take the bread,
I get it.
okay? Right? So the connection to this is, if I'm not allowed to pass over lechem, bread, because it's chashuv, it's important. Bread is considered this important staple of existence. So how can I step over a person, a child who's created b'tselem Elokim, God's image? I can't step over anybody. So some say that's the root behind it. Interesting. I'm just going to develop it a little bit more. How many of you have heard that you're not allowed to marry a woman who, finish the sentence?
2 or 3 times?
No, not that, not that.
Three,
No.
three
No,
husbands.
not that. I'm not referring to that. That's a separate thing.
Uh-huh.
You're not allowed to marry a woman who has the same name as your
Oh,
mother.
Yes, I
Say
heard
that
that.
is?
Same name as your mother.
I heard that.
You're not allowed to marry a woman who has the same name of your mother, as your mother. Right? Who does it come from? It comes from Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid. Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid, he wrote a tzavah, he wrote an ethical will to his mishpacha, to his family, and he said, don't marry a woman who has the same name as your mother. And people took that on. Right? People took that behavior on. Why Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid said it to his mishpacha, we don't know. Some people took that on. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi said some other things. You're not allowed to cut your hair on Rosh
You're
Chodesh.
Hanasi or?
I'm sorry, Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid.
Okay.
You're not allowed to cut your hair on Rosh Chodesh.
Why?
I don't know. Why can't you marry a woman of the same name as your mother? I don't know.
Oh,
But this was the tzavah that Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid left to his family. You're not allowed to cut your hair on Rosh Chodesh. You're not allowed to build on land that had never been settled before. These are some of the things that was in the tzavah that Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid. No. So now, can I observe these things? Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid wrote this as a tzavah to his family. Am I allowed to observe these things, or are they superstitions? What?
If you're crazy, yeah.
No, I mean, there's lots of people. Listen, I know relationships, Morris, that have not gotten started because the girl's name was the same as the mother's name.
yeah.
I use that as an excuse to get out of it. I'm sorry.
All right, there you go. There you go. I'm going to share, right? So there's a whole big machlokus about following these minhagim of Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid. In other words, were they meant just for his family? There are those who say you're not allowed to follow them because they were meant just for his family. It was a tzavah just for his family, and we're not allowed to. And others who say no, it was a tzavah for his family, but it applies to everybody.
But it could be a slippery slope to be, manipulated by all these things. Like you say, it does take away your bechira chavshit.
Okay, I'm going to close with one last thing, and I hope I'm not treading on any toes with this. I'll let you ponder this until next week. Birthday cake. Anything wrong with having a birthday cake?
Having,
A birthday cake.
A cake or the candles?
Having a birthday cake with candles, making a wish, and blowing out the candles.
On Shabbos? No, on Shabbos.
No, right?
Not on Shabbos, not on Yom Tov, not on Yom Kippur, not on the Tainus.
On Tuesday.
Not in
On
my house.
Tuesday.
Not in my
that's
house.
actually a machlokas.
On Tuesday. So there are those who say that you're not allowed to do it. Why? Because what's the origin of a birthday cake? What's the origin of a birthday cake?
I don't know.
So the birthday cake is round because it was paying tribute to the deity of the moon. The deity of the moon had a name. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Artemis or something like that. Artemis, the deity of the moon. And the reason candles were put on the cake was to imitate the light that the moon reflects, and that's the source for making a wish. Because why? What does it have to do? What is making a wish and your birthday and blowing out the birthday candles? What does it have to do? So the idea was that the wish, you were hoping that the wish would be fulfilled by the deity of the moon, right?
So
And
it's rooted in mythology.
it's rooted in
Avodah Zarah.
Avodah Zarah. It's rooted in Avodah Zarah.
Most people don't know.
Right.
Don't you have a square cake?
Oh, so interesting,
Carve
right?
out cake.
No, so Les asks a very interesting question,
Yeah.
right? So I would say if you're going to have a birthday cake, have a square birthday cake. Don't have a round birthday cake. And you can have candles, but don't make a wish. Whereas you have candles, but you don't make a wish. The poskim say that you could do it because for kids, for children, not for adults, but for children, because it's exciting for the children. It makes their birthday exciting. They don't know. They're not thinking Artemis. They're not thinking, moon goddess. They're not thinking any of these things. For them, sparkles, candy, cake, sparkly, candles,
Citizen.
right? So for them, you could do it, but you should teach your children this idea of making a wish is not appropriate for this concept of blowing out the candles, right? Along the lines of Darkei Amori, traced back to our pasuk of Velo Sa'aseh K'ma'asehim. Thank you very much. See you next week. Emir Tzashem.
Interesting.
Beautiful, thank you.
I thought
I'll
that
get it.
family
I'm
meant
going
the way
to
they
take-
dress, the
Well, just,
music,
wait,
the music,
wait.
the art, the way they
There are